Hello, it's Heidi Fisher here with the Social Enterprise Online Festival, and for this interview I'm joined by Grace, who's going to be talking to us about social investment. Grace, could you just tell us a little bit about your background and experience, please?
Yeah, hello everyone. So I'd say my background technically is as an economist. So I started out studying economics, but never really wanted to go into mainstream finance. I kind of started off there because I grew up in Sandwell in the Black Country, so it's quite a deprived area. So I guess I grew up around a lot of kind of disadvantage and inequality, and for some reason, from a very young age, I was always very determined that I would try and help change things in some way. I always say I had a bit of a messiah complex at the time, but I kind of figured, I thought studying economics and kind of policy and that sort of things might help me understand how things work and how I could at least help affect change in some way. So that's kind of where I started out. But then I guess through coming in that angle, I started to realise actually there was a lot about business and kind of economic systems and stuff that I didn't really think worked that well, and I didn't really like the value sets that sat behind businesses. So I started to look for alternative ways of doing business really, and wanted to find a way of doing things that put people at the centre and wasn't just all about maximising shareholder value. So I guess a long story short is I obviously came across the world of social enterprise. So really for the first 3 years after I graduated in economics, I spent exploring the social investment world, social enterprise world, mainly as a research kind of consultant. So I worked with the likes of Unlimited on the Big Venture Challenge programme. I even did a bit of overseas stuff, looking at social investment in developing countries with the Overseas Development Institute. But then I started to realise actually it was really working with social enterprises to help them grow and do more of what they do best. That's what I was really excited about. So that's when I took the job with Resonance, where I work now. I've been with Resonance for the last 4 years, and that's where I work now as a social investment manager.
Okay, that's good. At Resonance, you've just started doing some work in the West Midlands. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that is that you're doing and what you're up to?
Of course, yeah. So I've gone full circle. So now I'm back in the Black Country where I started, and we're launching here our latest social investment fund. So it's probably worth saying Resonance generally, we're a social investment company. So we help social enterprises grow their business and their social impact, mainly through raising investment where that's appropriate, and crucially do that by helping them find investors that really share their social mission. So we firstly do that as a consultant and direct deal arranger for social enterprises. But the second way, and this is the kind of half of the business that I work on, is through managing social investment funds. And we've got 7 under management now, about £150 million throughout those 7 funds. But our latest fund that's about to launch is one that's focused specifically on tackling poverty and disadvantage in the West Midlands, and that's called the Resonance West Midlands SOTR Fund. So that'll be live from January, but we're kind of warming things up now. So we've got kind of investors kind of committing to put their funds in. We're kind of finding our first investment deals. So it kind of exists, and Resonance has got their Birmingham office up and running now. But yeah, it'll be live, kind of open for investment from January. It might be worth mentioning that the key, I guess, innovation with this fund is the SOTR element in the title, which stands for Social Investment Tax Relief. And I can talk a bit more about that afterwards if you think that will be helpful for people. But essentially, it's a tool that we've put in to this fund to really try and make social investment more affordable and more accessible for social enterprises, because it's essentially a tax relief that investors that put their money into the fund can get when they're making investment. So it essentially means some of their financial return can get covered by this tax relief, and then we can offer a much lower interest rate, more flexible terms for social enterprises. So it kind of makes a bit more of a win-win and kind of spreads the benefit between the investor and the social enterprise, rather than kind of charging ridiculous rates for the social entrepreneurs.
Yeah, so I'm a great fan of the social investment tax relief. It's one of those things that actually, as you say, helps to make the financial return that a social investor wants perhaps lower than what it would usually be. Because I suppose the next question for me is, a lot of people talk about social investment, but then they're not always very social. Is that something that you've come across in your experience, that actually most people are primarily interested in a financial return?
I wouldn't say that's what we found as a rule. I mean, we definitely engage with a wide range of investors across the Resonance, so that's probably worth noting up front. So everything from we might have community share issues that involve community members that invest in very small amounts that have kind of lived in that community their whole life, right up to ultra high net worths is how they're referred to, and very wealthy people who maybe have never even heard of social investment before, and we've had the first chance to share that idea with them, so they're probably have just started their journey in terms of actually understanding social impact and starting to think how that applies to their investments. So I'd say there's definitely a big range. But I think the really exciting thing about the SOTR funds, that's my key role, is developing our SOTR funds. That's the main thing I'm involved with, is that it is real people. It's not kind of banks or institutions or even kind of grant makers. It's real people that we're having the opportunity to have conversations with and actually really learn what they're passionate about, and in a lot of cases for the first time helping them to think, how could I use my wealth to actually affect the change that I care about, and not just give my money away and not just support this one charity over here that I've kind of supported forever, but actually start to use some of my investment pot a bit more wisely as well. So I definitely have met a lot of investors that I'd say I've been looking for this type of opportunity for quite a while. So as an example, we've got 74 investors invested in our Bristol version of the SOTR fund, and we'll have similar numbers by January in the West Midlands. So there's lots of different stories behind it, but one example of an investor is someone who took early retirement from a tech company, very kind of skilled, and has helped develop some really cool kind of tech stuff. Retired early, obviously made quite a bit of money out of that, but had spent a lot of time in Bristol, and he called us and said, I'm so troubled by the homelessness problem in Bristol. I really want to help, I just don't know how, and I saw Resonance fund, and I wanted to know, what is this all about? Can you tell me a bit more about it? And he was saying, I'm so fired up by this, and I can't believe there's an opportunity for me to actually invest something significantly in the area. I've wanted to do it for so long and I've not known how. So there's definitely some people that really do genuinely care about the social impact, but I guess haven't had the opportunity before to know how to kind of put that into action, I guess.
So do you think social investment is becoming mainstream? It's what they keep putting in the press and on social media every week. It's mainstream. I think I've been reading that for about 3 years now.
I hope it will become mainstream, for sure. So I think, definitely me personally and us at Resonance, we are really passionate about it becoming the norm and actually changing the way people look at investment. And we really aspire one day for all investors to be asking, first of all, what impact is this having, and is it a good or neutral or negative impact? Because obviously all investments have an impact, whether it's good or bad. So we definitely want to see a world where that is the norm, where that is the first question investors are asking us. I don't think we're there yet, for sure. I definitely think there is definitely a growing group of investors that are at that point, and we definitely work with some of them where they really scrutinise the social impact, and it is the norm for them to really dive into that side of what their wealth is doing. But for some, we still meet investors that have never heard of social investment, don't really understand. They say, you know, isn't this just charity with a new label on the front? And we have to spend a lot of time with those people to really share examples of what social enterprises can achieve and what investment can achieve. So yeah, it's definitely a slow journey with some, but I think there's just more and more opportunity to share the story now. So we're trying to do as much as we can to, I guess, educate investors about what it's all about, really.
Okay, brilliant. So when you're looking to invest in a social enterprise, what kind of things are you looking for?
A good question. The key thing for me is understanding the social impact, for sure. And that sometimes I think sounds like a bit of a cop-out answer, because I guess all social investors should care about that. But I'm often quite surprised when I speak to social enterprises how difficult some find that to articulate. So they kind of there's almost an assumption that because we work with homeless people or because we work with ex-offenders, obviously we're doing a good thing. So kind of next question. And actually, for me, that's the thing I want to learn most about and actually understand. Or how do you know that's helping those people? Or where did that original social mission come from? And how has that changed over the last few years? And crucially, how is this investment going to help you do more of that? More deliver a bigger impact? And I think people struggle with that question, I think, because they can kind of say, oh, the investment will help me buy a new van, or the investment will help me buy a building. And actually, as social investors, obviously that's part of what we need to know, but it's not really a thing we care about. We only will make the investment if it means you can have a bigger impact in the lives of the people you're working with. So I think that's the key thing we look for, and probably have to spend more time digging out than maybe people might think, I guess. But beyond that as well, obviously there needs to be a business model behind the whole thing. So the key thing we look for really is just evidence that the social enterprise got something that they sell to people, really, and they've got an income stream that makes sense, and there's kind of evidence that people want to buy their goods or services going forwards, which again sounds a bit simple, but sometimes that is more difficult to get evidence of than you might first think. So I'd say those are the three. There's three kind of key questions that I always look for when I first meet a social enterprise. Firstly, the social impact, and how the social entrepreneur knows they're actually having a social impact, and how the investment could help them grow that. Second of all, are they actually selling anything, and how much have they sold? And then thirdly, how will the investment enable them to grow the business side as well? So if I can answer those three questions quite quickly in a conversation, I feel like actually this could be something that investment could really help with. So that's kind of where I start.
What about in terms of their like management team? Are you looking for a team or just one individual? How does that work?
Definitely the team is hugely important. I'd say I kind of move on to that probably late. Those first two things are my kind of first go-tos, because I think if there's clear answers to those, it makes me think it's kind of obvious there's a team behind it, I guess, that is doing the right thing. But yeah, definitely when we actually go into the detail of things, we'll look at the experience and the expertise of the management team, but also the board, obviously. Is a really big part. So we look at how long the board have been around, what specific bit of expertise each board member brings, and we essentially highlight any gaps. And if there are any gaps in the team, so it might be maybe a lack of financial expertise, or maybe marketing might be something they haven't got much expertise in, then we'll try where we can to help fill that gap. Because I think the team is the board at least, I think we can help fill those gaps through connections we've got, or we can at least kind of advise, you could do with strengthening your board in this area. It's not a complete deal breaker, meaning that you'll never get investment ever. So I think that's the key thing as well, that I really like about, I guess, Resonance's approach compared to maybe other approaches that I've seen, is that, well, actually, it's a key value of Resonance is that there's always a solution, is the key phrase that we use. So we'll never kind of say, you're completely uninvestable, never come back again. We try and work with social enterprise to say, is this a complete deal breaker? Does it mean that investment won't work for you? Or how can we help kind of overcome that gap, or kind of help you get the resource to be able to answer that question? So it means some people, the journey is quite long, sometimes multiple years before they actually end up taking an investment from one of our funds from when we first speak to them. Some people have all the answers kind of ready to go, and it's been a matter of months. So I think it doesn't mean one's right or wrong. I just think sometimes there's a lot more, there's some more gaps, I guess, in more situations than others that we try and help fill.
Okay, so in terms of preparing for social investment, are there any other particular things that organisations should do or get in place other than the things that you've just mentioned?
One thing I would say, so I'd say on the social impact side, I think a lot of time people think when I say social impact to be a big part, that they think we're expecting a kind of all singing, all dancing measurement system and social return on analysis figures popping out of everywhere, which we definitely don't expect. It's really about literally just being able to articulate things in words. I think it's actually a lot more simple than I think some people think we're looking for a lot of kind of scary, very technical things. So I would say before looking for social investment, just spend some time really being able to articulate your social impact and essentially the reason the business actually exists and what the distinctive difference is that you're trying to make in the world. I think if you can articulate that in words, it becomes much more easy to answer all the other questions about why you need investment or what impact you're actually having. So I'd say spend a lot of time thinking about that and really challenging that within your team and really working out what you care about. And I'd also say to try and sell things, which I know is easier said than done, but I think as soon as we can see at least some kind of evidence that there's sales that have happened, or even in some cases it's been helpful to have kind of letters of commitment from potential organisations that might want to work with you in the future, or just evidence that you've got some kind of network that is interested in what you have to offer. That can really help as well, even if you haven't got kind of 10 different income streams all doing really well. I think just evidence that you've moved along that journey is really helpful.
Yeah, so important to not be just purely grant funded and coming to you perhaps with an idea for a product or service, to have actually started to do something with that then.
Yes, our managing director, he always says that it's always a good sign if you've been able to sell something to more people than just your mom. So that's always a good sign. Because I guess ultimately sometimes it feels like as a social investor when you're kind of asking questions, and I think sometimes you can get the impression of your, I guess, being quite critical or trying to kind of knock the social enterprise down. But I think ultimately as a social investor that really cares about the impact being achieved, we would be very irresponsible to make an investment that we know would destroy the organisation, because the organisation as it is at that current scale is better than it not existing at all. And I think social investment, if it's not done properly and it isn't right for the company, can kill it, can make it fall over. I mean, it doesn't exist at all. So I think when we say things like that, we're not kind of being critical or trying to kind of call people out or, you know, think that their proposition's silly or anything, because it's definitely not about that. It's about saying, actually, if you really want to be sure that this is the right decision for you, then you need to have some kind of basis, some kind of sales, some kind of business model that we all believe in, else it could go the wrong way, I guess.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, well, Grace, it's been really good talking to you today. if you had to give your top 3 tips, what would they be?
Top 3 tips. I would say, I'll probably end up repeating myself a little, but I would say always stay true to your social mission, which I think is increasingly hard when you kind of got budget cuts all over the place and difficult kind of financial times. I think staying true to your social mission has to be the #1 priority. So I think that definitely means you have to have had time with your team, really sitting down, working out why you exist. And I think just finding literally a handful of things that at least convince you as a team that you're achieving the social impact you want to achieve. And as I say, they don't have to be all singing or dancing metrics that you have a fancy system behind the scenes monitoring. It can just be, a handful of things that you really make you feel confident that you're doing your job correctly and you're achieving what you set out to achieve, and just start measuring and monitoring those. So I'd say that would be my top tip, really, and not to think about the social impact as an external thing necessarily, like that you're doing it for investors or doing it for grant makers or whoever, but really make sure you're doing it for yourself so that you are really having the impact that you want to achieve and that you are ultimately staying true to your social mission. I guess related to that, another tip I would give is to make sure that if you are looking for social investment, to really make sure your social investor is completely aligned with that. So make sure your investor fully buys into your social mission and genuinely cares about it, because I think it's those investors that when times get a bit tough or when difficult decisions have to be made, if the social mission is like their paramount concern, then they will follow what decisions you're making, whereas if they don't buy into that, when times get a bit tough, it can obviously cause extra difficulties that you really don't need. So I'd say that'd be my top 2 tips if you're thinking about social investment.
Okay, brilliant. Well, it's been really good talking to you today, Grace. If people want to get in touch with Grace to find out any more about the West Midlands Citra Fund or any of the other funds that are available through Resonance, then Grace's contact details will be underneath the video. And yeah, so if you want to know anything more about their approach or what Citra is, Grace will be able to answer those questions for you. All right, well, thank you very much for joining me today, Grace. It's been good to see you. Bye-bye.